Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we got this thing all tore down. Well, tore down in the sense that I got the harness and everything down to the bare engine to take a look at everything. And it's pretty neat to see how big the exhaust and intake ports are on these direct injected motors. The intake is gigantic. Like, the ports are just huge in comparison. There's something in between. They look like a square and an LS7 all together. One thing I can comment on, which is pretty cool, is it is really easy to remove the intake. Considering that the fuel rails and everything don't exist, they're all underneath. You just brap a few times and lift the whole thing off, and since it has the DI interface down low, the intake sits kind of high and it doesn't really go down in between like it did before. It's really neat to see, you know, how they evolved and how they changed some things. So, one thing I did notice was I immediately threw an old starter on it and it looks fine. And I think I heard someone on Sloppy saying they are running a much newer truck starter on an old truck. So that's nice to know that they are compatible. The other thing is the motor mounts are different size, but Dingo sent me swap things for it. The pan is pretty big. The oil dipstick tube still broke off, even though this obviously has like no miles on it at all. One other thing, my buddy Joey was very concerned about how flat the ports would be. He was concerned about this boss right here, and as you can see, it is machined down so that this can stay flat. So his manifold will go right on. The only difference is they went to a unified center bolt. So he would just have to omit his programming or add the other bolt. I don't know if it'll bleed into the others. I guess that's something we'll see. Another interesting thing is this thing has a vacuum pump stock, and there's block-off plates and whatnot for it. I'd love to learn a little bit more about this and how it works. Does it draw from both sides of this? Does that go back into the pan? Why are they both threaded? Can you just screw in? Can you just screw a bolt in there and then leave this cavity open? It doesn't look like there's anything else in there. The pan is pretty big. What's interesting is it is two-piece. The other interesting thing is, like my buddy Calvin Nelson pointed out, is they don't do a gasket anymore. They just gray RTV everything. There's no more gasket. Holley reached out and they are going to send, they have a version of the 302-2 pan, a really short Fox body swap pan for the LTX. So, because I need a block off plate and a bunch of stuff anyway, and this pan is actually very big in every dimension, so that'll help, and I'm gracious for them for doing that. ICT Billet reached out, and War Performance has a vacuum plug block off kit, which I guess these have more vacuum plugs than you think, and a bunch need to get blocked off. So it's kind of nice that people are reaching out. Obviously this is my first swing, and there's probably going to be a bunch of things that I'm like, oh wow, this is now an issue. So they are getting on top of that first for me. That's nice to know also. So I guess the next thing I do will be ripping off the oil pan, and it is pretty much ready to drop in at this point. One thing I'd like to do is hit up my buddy Collis and see if he wants to trade for an alternator to a truck style alt and see if it'll go in, because the very bottom of this F-body style was hitting, this webbing was hitting the bracket. But other than that, it looks like a regular truck one will drop right in. So I want to get a regular truck one, drop it in, see if the belt goes on. And then other than that, we'll go from there. We'll try to get the motor mounts together, and then do a transmission dry run will be the next thing. Then I told you, like I said, I have this abundance of parts. We're gonna see if these headers will fit the car. They are for an LS, and they were in this car when it had an LS in it, had a 6-liter in it. But ours have the center bolt. That's not a huge issue. Holley also is going to send me, they have cast iron hooker manifolds that should fit a Fox that will bolt onto an LT that are not the stock manifolds. So I will have 3 different manifolds to test. That's awesome. That'll skip this thing right along and make it faster. So other than that, it's pretty neat to see this engine. Didn't get to take much of it apart. I will when I get the oil pan. And the other thing I read and saw from Calvin and other sources was that the oil pump seems to be digitally controlled. It looks like it has a relief that's controlled by PWM, similar to a transmission shift solenoid pressure bleed. It also has an O-ring. It doesn't have a pickup tube with an O-ring that goes in. It has an O-ring on the pump and the pan, so they bolt together with an O-ring. It doesn't technically have like the same pickup tube design. We'll go over that once I take it apart. I don't really want to take it apart right now unless I have the other pieces. Other than that, the bolt pattern is pretty similar for most of the bolts. The only interesting thing is the center guy is offset and has what looks like regular dowel and everything else. We'll just toss all that together, and then yeah, we'll try to get it in this guy, get everything else going. Other than that, just waiting on that stuff. It should come in this week, I bet. Usually get stuff from them pretty quick. I wouldn't be surprised if it's here tomorrow or Friday, and I can start on the pan this weekend. That'll be cool. Other than that, people were asking all sorts of questions. I thought I answered. It's going to be stock camshaft because the VVT and all bunch of other things are characterized off of the stock camshaft, including the mechanical injection pump. So putting a camshaft in it will screw up all of the base work and tuning from Holley. I don't really want to do that right now. They recommended that I just wait. It's my first swing. I'm just going to wait. They're going to fully characterize like the 38% cam, I believe. As soon as they're done with that, we can cam this thing, but we have a lot of burners on the fryer, or whatever you want to call it. Irons on the fryer, irons on the oven, pan. Help me out here, people. So we got a lot going on. We just want to get the engine in and running. It'd be cool. I definitely am going to add a flex sensor. Get that stuff going. Get the 6L80E going. Do the 1 through 5 things we want to test on a 6L80. And get that going in there. And see how it all does. And if it makes us happy and all of that other stuff. Test some other parts. It would be awesome to turbo this thing eventually. I see that happening. First and foremost, this is going to be a road rally car, so turboing it adds a hint of reliability issues and thermal overload to a vehicle. It's going to get floored for 30 plus hours at least. So not the first thing you want to do on a coast-to-coast thing is put this thing into thermal event most of the way. So putting it on all motor, putting it on flex, that stuff is easy to do. Seeing what it makes horsepower wise, getting the 6L80E working, putting it in here, giving all sorts of tips and tricks for that. It is kind of, it would be nice to circle back and find out the cheapest way to do all this, but I would love to do that. But after I learn more about this engine first, and then second, it has to be reliable and solidly mounted in this vehicle. It's not mine. This is going to go straight to reliable things. So it's not like it's going to be one of my test beds where I can mess around with stuff. So that's why I'm accepting motor mounts, everything else, all sorts of things. Hope you understand. So maybe one day we can circle back. It's neat to see all of the crazy, interesting, different things on these engines, like this wild water pump that sticks way out. So more on all of that from what we see and how it goes, and let me know what you guys think. Other than that, we're going to cut this off before 10 minutes because everyone uploads a video that's like 10 minutes and 1 second. So we're going to drop it off 20 seconds early. Okay, thanks, bye.